The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Lighting Controls Podcast. We are excited to have you back. We have a fantastic guest, but before we jump into it, let me just take a minute to remind everyone that this week's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association.
And it's also financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Also, check out our website if you haven't checked it out yet, lightingcontrolspodcast.com, where you can get the latest episodes, industry news, and some cool merch if you want to buy something. But also just want to say thank you to our sponsor for this episode, McWong, McWongInc.com. They have some great Bluetooth technology, award-winning Bluetooth technology, I should add. They have a North American-based company ready to support your projects that you've specified or are purchasing. Really great stuff. Worth checking out. We actually had a chance to do a live stream with them at Light Fair this year. And if you hadn't seen that, please check it out. We've got a recording of it on our website. But also just really a fantastic resource if you want to get a solid lighting control solution. But now let's get into the conversation with Ruth. Ruth, you're our guest today. Do you mind just giving us a 1-2 on who you are and what you do?
Alrighty, I'm Ruth Taylor. I work for Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. We're a Department of Energy lab. It's a lot of the work we do. I focus on buildings, energy efficiency work. My background is architecture. For the last 15 years, I've been working on lighting, part of the solid state lighting team for Department of Energy. And the last 5 years, we have been focused on trying to figure out the tough nut of configuration complexity with controls systems. So yeah, that's what I'm working on. Beat my head against the wall, but it's all good.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. I mean, I think, beating your head against the wall is kind of the mentality that a lot of us have when it comes to lighting controls. It can really be a difficult thing, and I applaud the efforts that you guys are doing at PNNL to try and create a more easy to approach either a specification process or control solution in general. I mean, it really needs to be said, and then you guys are saying it, which I appreciate. Just so that our listeners, maybe they might not be familiar with PNNL and all of the initiatives that you guys get involved in. Do you mind just giving us a little breakdown on that?
Sure. I mean, I'm not a good person to give you the lowdown on all that a national
Sure.
lab does. We do all over the place, national security work and biology and all that. But on the building side, for the Building Technologies Office for the Department of Energy, we've been focused on solid state lighting to begin with, 06 and 07, trying to, help the technology along and it be adopted, and so much energy potential that we got involved in a big way. My involvement in that was the next generation luminaires competition. So Jim Broderick had the view of, we had the caliper program that was testing, we had field demonstrations, we had lots of standard works going on the solid state lighting side, and then it became obvious we needed to shift over to the control side, that the luminaires themselves were taking hold. There was a lot better acceptance in the market and seeing lots of great energy savings, but then there's so much potential on the control side. So that's why Department of Energy is interested in that. We've taken the approach, when we moved past the luminaire focus side, we needed to see the systems in action, right? So we needed to go into the field, watch what's going on, see where the kinks are when you really let things play out and really don't interfere. Just see what happens in real time. And it's opened a lot of avenues. We thought we were focusing on the technology, right? What do we need to help manufacture? It's really about the people, right? It's the intersection of the people and the technology, particularly with controls. So that's where the research side of it, we're bringing in to dig into things that probably can't happen on a broad level from any one manufacturer or any one organization. Our installation in New York, we had 14 different systems we were looking at, so we could compare and contrast and get a non-biased approach to what's going on. I don't know, is that helpful?
No, I think that's great. And I mean, that's a really good point of entry for me for awareness with PNNL, because when I started hearing about the living laboratory and the work that you were doing, I was really fascinated by the results that you were getting and all of the basically you're talking. I remember this one video you had of a contractor standing on a ladder, like, how the heck do I install this? Like, where's the instruction? Like, it was like they didn't understand a single thing about the system. And so you're right, just kind of going through the motions is part of the process of understanding what happens, because from a specifier's perspective, it's all sterile. It's like, okay, yeah, I said this, it should be this. And then from the installer's perspective, it's, you said this, but it's actually this. And so
Right.
it's kind of hard to marry the two at times.
Well, it's a real convergence of different players that are playing together in a way they haven't before.
Right.
You've got the IT folks and the security issues, and you've got to talk to them about this and that, and who has the all of that. And then you've got the design community, how specifiers talk, how they explain things, how architects do. And then you've got electrical contractors they are not used to having a password, right? They're not used to having to get on their phone app and figure stuff out. And the vocabulary is just inconsistent, as it always is between disciplines, right? So you've got them all coming together at once, and the manufacturers are like, well, just what do you want me to call it? I don't, because they have their own language as well.
Right.
And it's not that easy to change. Right? I mean, how many places, if you're going to change device to some other word that's more acceptable, how many thousands of times do you have to change that in your product literature? It's not an easy ask. So I think an organization like Department of Energy and PNNL can maybe take a broader role and say, can we just all play in the sandbox together and decide on some words together? And yes, obviously we work closely with them. It's in their purview to really come up with the definitions of things, but we're trying to help where we can and where it's appropriate.
Well, there's an incentive from the Department of Energy's perspective to have consensus, because it's these issues that come up that cause a loss in an increase in wasted energy. Because
Right.
if a system's not easy to install, then it's more likely that it's going to get overridden. The classic example is you have a photo sensor in a room and everybody hates how it works, so they take a piece of clear tape and put it over the sensor, and then all the savings are out the window.
Yep. And it's been happening for decades, right? I mean, controls are not, we have had trouble with the old stuff. So now you enter in all this new stuff, and it's configuration complexity on steroids. It's really hard to, I always, break it down into chunkable stuff that you can get your head around what's going on. So we've spent a lot of time, what I call the sky is falling, we're seeing all these issues and what are we going to do? And now we've been directed, okay, can we start with some solutions here? Can we make some progress? And so some of those easiest things we're trying to tackle first, educational materials and training materials and stuff like that to try to help.
Well, and on that point, Ron and I both attended a great workshop that you and other members of PNNL put together at Light Fair this year, that really kind of tried to help people understand lighting control systems and look at it through the lens of an agnostic specification as opposed to a proprietary specification. So, typically a common model right now for specifying a lighting control system is to take a manufacturer and build a system around what that manufacturer has. Whereas, correct me if I'm wrong, but the point of the workshop that you were doing was to flip that around and say, okay, ignore the manufacturer for a second, look at what really is important for the project, and then find the manufacturer that's applicable to that.
Yeah, what we discovered looking into all this, part of observation, partly just talking to people around the country, is that this proprietary approach is, it's all you can do right now, right? You're not being responsible if you don't really know your product clearly. But there are times when I think, and especially new specifiers who are not as versed in these complicated control systems or more advanced control systems, they're scared to death of doing something wrong, and they don't even know the right questions to ask, and they go to their buddy that they've always worked with forever, and he can take care of them, and they're really, you don't even know if it's the right thing for your owner. How would you even know if you're not versed in 7 different systems, which is impossible. That's one of the things that it was a surprise to me when we started looking at all the systems in Parsons. One of the main things we took away was helping people understand the differences, right? We were able to name names, to name manufacturers, and just very agnostically, no pros or cons, just this system does it this way, this system does it, just so you can see it laid out, starts to help you ask the right questions and understand what's going on. So that's this approach that we presented at Light Fair, and we're going to present again at IES, was really trying to help that specifier who needs to know the right questions to ask, needs to understand the general architecture of the different systems, understand the risks involved with different choices. The idea, how can you really meet the needs of your owner if you can't really look at a multitude of systems and make good choices for them and connect the dots of what they're saying they need and what systems actually offer. Because predominantly what comes across in so many interviews and so many things, expectations on everybody's end are not met. Everyone's doing this and they're blaming everyone, and the owners are saying, well, what in the heck is that? Either that they don't want anything or they want everything and don't understand why they want everything, right? Because it's cool. I want that new bell and whistle. And we're like, okay, well, just you need to know the consequences of that choice, basically.
Right. And I think, that was so what you did in this workshop was essentially have people go through the process of identifying the needs of a project, the pain points of a project, going through the documentation, which was interesting because what you used for documentation for the manufacturers in this case was the brochure. And personally, I never look at the brochure. I immediately rule out the brochure as any authoritative document. And so when I was actually reading through it, I was like, yeah, of course there's nothing in here. Like, I'm not going to find the information that I need. So I was, when I thought you originally, when I saw like documentation, I thought, oh, we're going to like read spec sheets. We're going to go through the installation manuals. We're going to like dig in and do the stuff that I do and Ron does on a daily basis. But to your point, the brochure should actually be informative enough for you to make those high-level decisions.
Yeah, because people can't. Typically, if you really don't know anything about very many systems and you're trying to figure it out, you're not going to dive right into spec sheets and installation manuals, and then you're 250 pages in, and you really are scared to death of what to do next. And hopefully, we have good correspondence with manufacturers as well as others in the industry, so we're hoping sometimes this kind of thing can help a manufacturer see, oh, okay, they really do need more information than that from the first go. It's not, you can't just have the marketing people put that stuff together, and it's a great picture on the front, but we need a little more than that. So hopefully that conversation will continue to happen.
Yeah, I found that exercise fascinating because you guys really, for context, as you grouped everyone, you tried to separate contractors and you tried to put people in groups with, you tried to make the groups so that they had people from every discipline, right? So there was a contractor, there was a specifier, there was a designer, and it was interesting to see everyone's different take. And like Webster said, marketing sheets, throw them out the window. I look at the spec sheets, but from a designer's standpoint, they shouldn't have to. The designer should be able to look at that marketing brief, whether it's 5 pages or 10 pages or whatever it is, and be able to get enough information out of that to have an understanding of what the system can and can't do at a high level, without needing to really dive into all that documentation. And I had never considered that. So I thought that exercise was fascinating. And it was a really good way to be able to show the manufacturers, hey, you guys have some work to do,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was an enlightening part of the process to see that it really is. You can look at all this information and your system are like we went through generics. It's all generic. How do you get over to specifics, particularly with the vocabulary problem, right? Everybody calls their gateway something else, or the controller has another kind of a name. And it is confusing. And sometimes, of course, just the marketing material is not enough, but the next step would be, if you're calling your manufacturer rep and maybe they rep several different products, or maybe you have 2 or 3 different reps, how do you have that intelligent conversation where okay, does so and so, what do they call their gateway, and how does their gateway, does it connect to the internet, that and are they Bluetooth, or that it's not, you don't have to know every detail, but you need to know what the words mean. To how does that capability in a system relate back to the use case my owner has told me that they are demanding, and can that system actually do it effectively? You need to be able to use the right words and ask the right questions. Anyway, that was our premise for this, and we'll let the industry tell us if it's helpful. But we did have a lot of interest at Light Fair, so I think it is resonating, and I really got a lot out of the I can't remember which one, whether it was the workshop or the 1 hour, but I felt like specifiers in the room gained some agency in terms of, hey, why isn't this more consistent? Why isn't this more standardized? Why can't they use the same word? I mean, what can we do about this, right? What can we do about this? And we kept saying, you can do a lot, but you need to step up and tell manufacturers what you need. And maybe we need to do that with some kind of unified voice, working groups and whatever it might be. But the manufacturers are open and willing. They just can't change everything all the time to each person's need and whim, right? That's just not, they just can't do it. So I'm hoping maybe this will be some impetus for us to come together and say, come on, guys, let's get together on this and try to have some more consistency. That's what we're hoping for sure.
Sure. Well, and so just to kind of clarify that point, it sounds like it's a communication issue that we're having in our industry. It's not so much that the manufacturers are saying, no, we're not going to do that. Get away from me. This is going to cut into my bottom line. And it's not that specifiers are being really lazy and saying, I'm just going to keep using brand X because it's easy. It's because there's just no easy way to bring that information back and forth in a fluid manner so that it's agreed. Like, yes, that makes sense. For instance, 0 to 10 volt. What do we call that? That's a discussion that's ongoing with IES right now where, should it be 10 volt? Should it be, some other term? But we haven't even agreed on that, let alone bigger terms that are, more impactful. So I think, what you're saying here is that a way to fix, or at least get closer to fixing this, is to find an intermediary, something that can be a forum for discussion, allowing everybody to put their thoughts in and share them in a way that helps advance the point.
Yeah, and there's always, if you haven't worked on a standards group, I think people we try to go straight from, we need to get some consensus, and we go straight to the ANSI standards process, which, enters an alternate universe, sometimes, because and for good reason. I mean, it's standards. They have to be exact. The wording has to be exact because it is a you shall do something or whatever. But there may be, I'm hoping, some mechanisms for consensus that maybe doesn't have to be at that level, but it's just an industry consensus about some things that everyone can agree to. I thought vocabulary be the lowest hanging fruit of all, but it's just not. It's not. It's like, let's just all get together and decide on the right words. They're not. No one is right. I mean, sometimes there's incorrect ones, but usually everyone's just saying the same thing in a different way. But it's just easier said
I would say,
than done.
Yeah, and I would say that part of the challenge here is that we also have our own versions of words that other industries use in a different way.
Yep.
Right.
And as a result, we have people from outside our industry come into our industry and say, you can't use that word that way. That's not right. Everybody else is using it differently. And so we have just all of these disparate opinions when it comes to terminology that really makes it difficult for us to reach consensus.
So many. The one that came up all the time in our observations was device. Gee, could we have a more generic word than device? But everything is a device. And installers were like, a lighting fixture is not a device, but to a manufacturer it is. In a a digital control system, yeah, it's a device. Everything's a device. So it's even harder than picking the right word. There's all these generic words too.
Even adding to that, the word fixture. There are a number of groups that hate that we use fixture. They insist on us using luminaire. And then if you look at theatrical, there's instrument.
Yes.
In the theatrical world, you never call a light a fixture or a luminaire. You call it an instrument.
Right.
So
gateway is.
I didn't even know that. Oh, gateway is.
Yeah, that one crosses every industry.
I actually had a great discussion with somebody in my group during that workshop about what a gateway was, and her interpretation was that a gateway was a necessary component of a networked system. If you didn't have a gateway, you didn't have a network. But as we discussed further, we discovered that gateway wasn't the essential part, and so it was just, again, it's one of those things where it gets carried forward in people's minds, but it doesn't actually have anything that people can point to and say, this is what it is.
Yeah. And then manufacturers have cutesy proprietary names for stuff that just really gets you confused. Like, is that a gateway they're talking about? Their super duper +1 module or what, whatever it might be. So that, that even confuses people more.
Well, and I'm curious if you have any theories on this, but like when it comes to coming up with a term or a name or something, whether it's the fancy proprietary thing or whether it's a generic thing, what do you think is going on behind the scenes when they do that at the outset?
When manufacturers do that, you mean? Well, I think they want it to sound less scary. Right? They want it to feel like all these parts and pieces, they go together and they all have similar names and they just feel cohesive, because from their perspective, they do want you to just use all of their stuff how they intend. And they're right. Right now, you got to pare it down as much as you can if you don't want to have chaos in the field. And you guys would know better on that than me, but that's what it seems to me like.
Well, no, I think it's a good theory right there. I mean, it's something that, I would just take for granted. It's like, okay, fine, you're going to call it that. I don't care.
Right.
Like in my mind, it fits category X. So I'm just going to categorize it this way, even though you call it that. But to your point, I think you're right. It needs to be more approachable because of the fact that otherwise, if we call it, a fiber optic switch with, 3G, etc., suddenly people are going to go, whoa, what the heck is that? That's not what I need. I just need something simple. And it's like, well, no, this is simple. It's just a gateway.
It's just a gateway.
Well, I remember, I think it was John Williams, a presentation he did, and he's like, let's get rid of the word gateway. Gateway scares everyone. Let's don't use that word. Well, that's not an answer either. But I think his point was, as soon as someone hears that word, oh, complicated, networked, that's not what I want. And so perceptions, it's expectations and perceptions are key as human beings. And I think it's easy to forget. Every time I have a conversation with an IT person, they're always so calm and just do this and oh, I'm not sure why it did that, but click here and click here, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? It feels so out of control. Like I always say, driving a school bus without a steering wheel, right? It's like you just and you will avoid it at all costs because it's not a matter of digging in and figuring out, it's that you have no idea what to even do. Well, that doesn't work. Why isn't that working? Oh, that should be working. I don't know why that's not working. Well, it's people have almost like an irrational fear of that disconnectedness and feeling like you just don't know what to do next. And I see, we're seeing it in lighting controls, just like you do anything. You try to get your computer to work for a podcast. Something's going to go out probably when you're trying to figure it out, right? Because some device doesn't talk to the other one. We all experience it every day. But if your lights don't turn on because it's doing that, it's a much bigger problem.
So the Luddites in my head are right now screaming a question, which is, well, why don't we just go back to the way things were?
Well, that's not an answer. No,
but there are a lot of people who will say, why can't we just go back to switches on the wall and relay panels and be done with it?
Well, I mean, we all know the train's left the station, but I think there is so much potential, right? I mean, if you get all this, what we do for humans that are a pain in the butt on this, right? We're the ones that cause all the problems.
Hold on.
Yes.
You clipped through. So, do you mind just starting over from "There's so much potential" because you were jumping around?
Oh.
Yeah. Oh. Speaking of things not working.
Yeah. Okay. But this is an important point. We are seeing a lot of issues, but there's so much potential with this technology for the humans that are occupying the space. The color of the light, our comfort, and businesses and more productivity, and I mean it's so cool, but we just have to work through these people problems and not ignore sort of the barriers that are there and the difficulty, not undermine them, not patronize people when they say no, but to work through it in a way that makes sense so that it is about energy savings, but it's about so much more than that in my opinion. And we'll get there.
Yeah, for sure. But no, I mean, I think you're absolutely right that, it's not just the fact that we have it available to us. It's the fact that it offers so much value, and not just from an energy saving standpoint, but from a user experience standpoint. I mean, everybody has their own preferences when it comes to lighting. Everybody has their own needs when it comes to lighting. Each space is unique. And so being able to tap into the capabilities of a modern lighting control system can really free up the person to use the space the way they want if the system works.
Right. And to your point for your light fair session on all that the administration is doing with electrification and decarbonization and all the EV charging. I mean, we are going into a whole new era of how we're handling things, and controls have got to be a part of that. And we just need to keep up with it all. And we're doing some of our research, we're applying it to other technologies, control technologies for HVAC equipment, because a lot of the same people problems are there. They're, a thermostat's not that different than a light switch, right?
Right.
In terms of how people interact with it. So I think we've got to just stop and pay attention and move together on this. And I think it's going to be cool to see where it goes
No,
and how fast we can get there.
absolutely. I mean, from a end goal in mind perspective, the end goal is to have a holistic system that meets the needs, not just energy wise, but occupancy wise, technology wise, all of these things. And we have the capability of doing that right now. It's just not easy to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're trying to do is make it easy to get there, or at least less confusing, less difficult and frustrating for people. If there is consensus, then we can all kind of walk in lockstep towards that destination.
Yeah, and I think what we discovered, because the issues can be overwhelming, to try to think in terms of how you chunk it into pieces that can be attacked as a group, right? Things like this particular standard, or consistency on vocabulary, or the interoperability issues. There's some groups that are working hard on it. It is a holistic. I mean, we sort of diagrammed it with products, process, and people, right? It's an intersection of those three that you have to pay attention to all of them. Right? We have a lot of issues with the documentation and process part, and how we're writing our sequence of operations, or, all those kind of things that are in the process side. But then manufacturers are still totally proprietary and not completely interoperable. They're trying, but there's still a lot of kinks there, and then you got people that are just crazy all around, so it's it has to be all three of those, and keeping an eye on them and trying to chunk off little pieces that are digestible, because there's no silver bullet here. There's no just, if this one thing would happen, then all of it would be perfect. It just isn't there.
Yeah, and you have to add education to that, not just for all of us, but for the installers, the electricians,
Yes.
and everyone else. You could have the perfect system. You could have everything figured out and have all these kinks worked out. But if the electrician doesn't understand it, and they run the wrong communication wire, and the system has communication failures and doesn't operate, we all still look bad, right? Top to bottom, it doesn't matter. It's the manufacturer, it's the specifier, it's everybody. So it's unfortunate. We have to get down through everyone. That education piece is just so important, all the way through the contractors. How do we tackle that?
Well, we actually have, that's where I'm spending all of my time, just about, for the rest of the year. What stuff that's not on the HVAC side is workforce training materials. So we're doing educational things like we did at Light Fair that are more specifier focused. We're going to take some of those materials and make training modules out of them, like self-directed, voiceover, PowerPoint with video, that kind of thing. But then we're also dovetailing that with other workforce training certification programs, community college programs, and sort of reframing and retasking using some of the same materials that then can be used in those programs for particularly installers, electrical contractors, and facility and maintenance managers. Those two groups are the hardest, particularly facilities folks. You can't get their attention, and they just want it to be easy. Someone gets one complaint, it's gone. It's they're the group that really needs help, but they're really hard to get to, really hard to get to. So that's, we have seen that exactly, Ron, that is, if we can't get to that level, then it's not gonna make that much difference. We've got to all raise, all the ships need to come up together for sure.
Yeah. No, and I mean, again, I think these initiatives that PNNL are doing to really help facilitate. I'm really excited to hear that you're doing workforce trainings, and I'd be curious to if you would be okay sharing. You don't have to share, but how are you planning on disseminating that? Are you planning on reaching out to contractors and groups, or are you going to try to just be an open forum available to people reaching out?
No, we are trying to make specific, and that's why we're talking to a bunch of these programs now to figure out how they do their certifications and training, what kind of materials they use now, so that we can hopefully develop modules that just hand them off, right? Here, just take this, very annotated notes, lots of support. We are doing some self-directed kinds of things that people can just come to the website and learn, but then the training programs can use those too, if it's appropriate. But yeah, we're not in the business of training ourselves. We're not going to just throw them out on a website somewhere because no one will ever find it. So we are, and I'll probably be asking you guys for help on this, right? And others who
Sure.
are listening to this, I'd love to hear where are the best avenues, current certification programs that we can just add the content, just give them the content. They can just put it in as a module. Because it's pretty limited. These programs are typically in energy manager kind of programs or facility manager, and this is just one little piece, but it's a hard piece to develop if you're not in the weeds on this. So I think most would really welcome having some modules that could help. So that's our plan. We're in the process now of talking to a bunch of those groups to see actually exactly what they need.
That's great, and I think that that's really critical because sometimes when you create a curriculum, you just make assumptions and you develop something and it's a complete miss. So I think it's really important that you're doing that outreach and getting feedback so that you can really cater it to what they actually need, or at least what they say they need. I mean, sometimes it's hard
sometimes
to
they
know
don't know
that, but I mean, so I'm really excited to see what comes out of this development, and we'd absolutely love to have you back on to talk through when you have that material available, because
cool. Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Right in line with what Ron and I keep saying with trying to get information and education out there. So, but well, Ruth, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
And again, we'll definitely have you back on when these modules are starting to get released, maybe next year or so.
Okay, but sounds good.
Also really appreciate all the work that you and your team are doing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Ruth, thank you so much. And if you guys want to learn more, check out Ruth's profile information. Check out what PNNL is doing. Like you said, we'll have her back on when this is ready, and we can disseminate some of that additional training information. But just want to take a minute to remind everyone that this week's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. If you haven't checked out our website, because I keep reminding you and you don't want to, check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our archived episodes, great news from the industry, and some merch if you want to support the podcast. Otherwise, thanks so much to our sponsor for this episode, McWong. Go to McWongInc.com to check out their award-winning Bluetooth lighting control solution. They have North American support for any of the projects that you have in North America. I mean, they have international support as well, but we're speaking specifically about North America here. But also, they're a really great resource hitting on the topic of this conversation that we had in this episode. They are one of those groups that really try to be transparent and informative, and they are working on integration resources with other systems. So definitely worth checking them out, McWongInc.com. Thank you so much for joining us here. And thank you, Ruth, so much. Really great conversation.